we sent thee not, but as a mercy for all creatures. Life of Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Last of the prophets ordained as a mercy unto mankind. Fazal Kareem. Contact Fazal Kareem at Karachi, Pakistan. Mobile number 092-300-256-5845 or mail at fazalkareem@yahoo.com. Contents. Foreword. AI Preface 2. Chapter 1. Arabia, Geographical Position. Pre-Islamic Arab Civilization. Global View of Islam. Christianity in the 6th and 7th centuries. Persia. Melting pot of civilization. Buddhism in India, 250 BC. India. Emergence of Islam. Spiritual condition of Christianity. Social debasement of Arab society. Sanctity of Mecca. Political condition of Arabia. Abdullah son of Abdul Muttalib, father of Prophet Muhammad, SAW. Chapter 2. A prophet is born. Birth of Muhammad, SAW. Muhammad's youth. Personality of Muhammad, SAW. Some supernatural occurrences in Muhammad's life. Reconstruction of Kaaba in quest of truth. First revelation. 610 AC. Waraka bin Nawfal, the curious Aishite. Muhammad's mission takes off. Invitation to join Islam. Resolution of Abu Talib to defend Muhammad. Conversion of Hamza. Emigration to Abyssinia. Conversion of Umar ibn al-Khattab. Temptation of worldly honors. Delegation of Utbah Abu Jahl. Vows. Companions of the cave. Pagan goddesses. The false story of Muhammad's reconciliation. Proclamation of social boycott of Banu Hashim and Banu al-Muttalib. Social and economic boycott. Annulment of the boycott. Return of the exiles. A wrestling bout. Male offspring of the Prophet. Al-Isra or nocturnal ascent of the Prophet. The year of sadness. Persecution intensified. The Prophet turns for help to Chapter 3. Array of hope from Yathrib. First pledge of Akbar. Jews and Arabs in Yathrib. Second pledge of Akbar. 13th year of the Prophet's mission. The Quraysh and the Akbar. Emigration to Yathrib. Conspiracy to murder the Prophet. Miracle in the cave. The Hijrah of the Prophet. If the Prophet acquires a plot for the mosque. The call to prayers. Muhammad, SAW, elected chief of Banu Najjar. Chapter 4. Muhammad, SAW, in the role of statesman and nation builder. Charter of Rights, the new constitution. Construction of Madinah, text of constitution. Chapter V. Wars for survival and self-defense. Fighting for survival. Prisoner of war. Effects of the victory at Badr. Battle of Uhud. The Jewish tribes. Banu Nadir expelled. Prophet's secretary, Zayd ibn Thabit, appointed. The Battle of the Ditch. Proclamation of pilgrimage. Covenant of Rowan. Treaty of Hudaybiyah. Abu Jandal son of Suhail ibn Amri. Expedition to Khyber. Plot to poison the Prophet. Jews in the midst. Treatment of Jews by the Arabs. Fadak. An episode concerning humanitarian aid to the Meccans during a famine. Pilgrimage fulfilled. The Prophet marries Maymuna and Khalid. Enters Islam. Expedition to Mu'atta. Quraysh violates the pact. Chapter V. The conquest of Mecca. Abu Sufyan meets the Prophet, professes Islam. Prophet Muhammad enters Mecca. Prophet in the house of God. The Prophet destroys the idols. The Battle of Hunain and siege of the raid on Tabuk. Ali left behind in charge of Medina. Chapter 7. The year of the deputations. Letter to ruler of Egypt, the Roman governor. Letter to Khosrow, emperor of Pars, Persia. Letter to Pope of Rome. Letter to Jews of Khyber. Letters to chiefs of Akbar. Letter to the people of Magna. Christians of Najran. The pact with Najran. First letter to Negus, king of Ethiopia. Reply of Negus. And third letter. Pilgrimage led by Abu Bakr. Chapter 8. Command to fight the polytheist. Farewell pilgrimage. What is Islam? Prophet explains who are the righteous. The Holy Quran commands married life of Prophet. Veil and chastity. Episode of Ali at Ghadir al-Qum. The Prophet owns Ali. Chapter 9. Impostors. Prophet falls ill. The last moments. The succession and burial. Ansars meet in the hall of Bani Sa'ida. Muhammad, SAW, the greatest of mankind. A homage. Prophecies concerning the advent of the Prophet Muhammad, SAW. AI. Foreword. My late, revered father, Maulvi Muhammad Qasim Khan Saib, of Hyderabad, Deccan, India, who was an eminent educationist, writer and scholar, was the first Muslim to bring out an explanatory translation of the Holy Quran in a South Indian language, Telugu, the mother tongue of 97 million people of Andhra Pradesh, In the year 1944, along with a 200-page commentary explaining and discussing the teachings of Islam in a broader perspective of studies in comparative religion, between Islam and Hinduism and Islam and Christianity. The Hindu intellectuals and the religious elite of Andhra Pradesh paid him glowing tributes for his scholarship and his style in expounding the message of Islam in a new light. Sir C. R. Reddy, M.A. Kantab, the then Vice-Chancellor of Andhra University, observed, "Your Telugu translation of the Holy Quran is a work of the highest merit and deserves the highest publicity. The matter is of supreme importance, the style elegant, clear, impressive, your notes pointing out coincidences and harmonies and parallels between the Quran and the Hindu scriptures are a monument to your scholarship and power of thought." In his preface to the second edition, 1945, he said that he would bring out a biography of the Prophet Muhammad, SAW, for providing a fuller appreciation of the religion of Islam to the Telugu-speaking public, but due to disturbed circumstances he could not complete the work. There is no dearth of biographies of the Prophet Muhammad, SAW, in English, but this one has been written with a new angle, and I hope that the readers will find the work more informative, more instructive, concise and handy. May Allah, the most merciful, most gracious, accept my humble contribution to glorify His Apostle. Amen. Fazal Karim. A2. Preface. Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him, was the last of a line of the biblical prophet ordained by God and sent among the Arabs to preach the unity of God and the universal brotherhood of mankind. In the course of his preaching for 13 years in Mecca, he suffered persecution of the harshest type at the hands of pagan Arabs, the vilest of the people that ever lived on the face of the earth, but he faced them with humility, patience and wisdom. He was born in the noblest family of the elite tribe of Quraysh, whose preeminence was recognized by the rest of the tribes of Arabia. The Quraysh tempted him with all kinds of riches and what more, kingship over them, if only he ceased to condemn their gods and their idols which they and their forefathers had been worshipping. They sent an ultimatum to Abu Talib, the uncle of Muhammad. They went in person in a delegation a second time, and said, "You have a high and lofty position among us, and we have asked you to put a stop to your nephew's activities, but you have not done so. By God, we cannot endure that our fathers should be reviled, our customs mocked and our gods insulted. Until you rid us of him, we will fight the pair of you until one side perishes." Thus saying, they went off. Abu Talib was deeply distressed, sent for his nephew and told him what his people had said. "Spare me and yourself," he said. "Do not put on me a burden greater than I can bear." The apostle thought that his uncle had the idea of abandoning and betraying him and that he was going to lose his help and support. He answered, "O my uncle, by God, if they put the sun in my right hand and the moon on me left on condition that I abandon this course, until God has made it victorious, or I perish therein, and I would not abandon it." Then the apostle broke into tears, and got up. As he turned away, his uncle called him and said, "Come back, my nephew," and when he came back, he said, "Go and say what you please, for by God, I will never give you up on any account." The apostle gathered strength and continued to call the people to abandon idolatry and believe in one God and fear God and seek His forgiveness and piety, adore God who created you. Soon, Hamza, an uncle of the apostle, converted to Islam, and within 3 days of this event, Ammar, an avowed enemy of the faith, started from his home determined to kill Muhammad, but dramatically changed his mind and forthwith presented himself before the apostle and converted to Islam. Ammar was a firebrand, a leading notable commanding respect and obedience. The conversion of Ammar and Hamza, in the 6th year of Prophet's mission, added strength to the small community of the believers. Quraysh were now really felt alarmed lest Ammar and Hamza gain the upper hand over the Quraysh. more and more people were joining the fold of Islam. The notables of Quraysh gathered one day outside the Dabba and decided to send for Muhammad and to negotiate and argue with him. Muhammad appeared before them promptly. Now they wanted to tempt him with all sorts of worldly honors, even kingship over them if he abandons his faith. The apostle replied that he had no such aspirations. He sought not money, nor honor, nor sovereignty, but God had sent him as an apostle, and revealed a book to him, and commanded him to become an announcer and warner. He had brought them the messages of his Lord and given them good advice. If they took it, then they would have a portion in this world and the next. If they objected it, he could only patiently wait. They said, "If you won't accept any of our propositions, you know that our people are more short of land and water, and live a harder life than we, so ask your Lord, who has sent you, to remove for us these mountains which shut us in, and to straighten out our country for us, and to open up in it rivers like those of Syria and Iraq, and to resurrect for us Aqaib Kilab, for he was a true sheikh, so that we may ask him what you say is true or false. If they say that you are speaking the truth, and you do what we have asked you, we will believe in you, and we shall know what your position with God is, and that he has actually sent you as an apostle as you say." Muhammad replied that he had not been sent with such an object. He had conveyed to them God's message. They could accept it with advantage, or reject it and wait for God's judgment. Then they resorted to silly talk and taunting, asking him to seek something for himself instead of standing in the streets and work for his livelihood as they did, or let the heavens be dropped on them to reduce them to pieces, adding, "By God, we will not leave you in our treatment of you, until either we destroy you or you destroy us." One day, when his assembly of the Quraysh was sitting in the mosque of Thbabi, Rabia, who was a chief, addressing the assembly, said, "Why should I not go to Muhammad and make some proposals to him which, if he accepts in part, we will give him whatever he wants, and he leave us in peace?" They all thought that it was a good idea. Uthba went and sat by the Prophet and said, "O my nephew, you are one of us, as you known, of the noblest of the tribe, and hold a worthy position and ancestry. You have come to your people with an important matter, dividing their community thereby and ridiculing their customs, and you have insulted their gods and their religion, and declared that their fathers were unbelievers, and perhaps you will be able to accept." The apostle agreed, and he went on, "If what you want is money, we will gather for you of our property so that you may be the richest of us. If you want honor, we will make you our chief so that no one can decide anything apart from you. If you want sovereignty, we will make you our king, and if this ghost which comes to you, which you see, is such that you cannot get rid of him, we will find a physician for you." The apostle listened patiently and then said, "Now listen to me." He recited some verses from the Holy Quran that were recently revealed, "In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful." Ha-Mim. 1. A revelation from Allah, most gracious, most merciful. 2. A book, whereof the verses are explained in detail. 3. A Quran in Arabic, for people who understand. 4. Giving good news and admonition, yet most of them turn away, and do they hear not. 5. They say, "Our hearts are under veils, concealed, from that to which thou dost invite us, and in our ears is deafness, and between us and thee is a screen, so do thou, what thou wilt, for us, we shall do what we will." 6. Say thou, "I am but a man like you, it is received to me by inspiration that your Allah is one Allah, so stand true to him and ask for his forgiveness, and woe to those who join gods with Allah." 7. Among his signs are the night and the day and the sun and moon. Adore not the sun and the moon, but adore Allah who created them, if it is him ye wish to serve. XLI, Sajda. After the recitation was over, he placed his forehead on the ground in prostration. Then, he said, "Thou hast heard what you have heard." Then the apostle continued to recite it to him. Uthbert turned to his companions. They noticed that his expression had completely changed and they asked what had happened. He said that he had heard words such as he had never heard before, which was neither poetry, spells nor witchcraft. "Take my advice and do as I do. I have heard will be blazed abroad. If other Arabs kill him, others will have riddled you of him. If he gets better of the Arabs, his sovereignty will be prosperous through him." They said, "He has bewitched you with his tongue." To which he answered, "You have my opinion, you must do what you think fit." Afraid to lay their hands on the notables, the Quraysh turned their anger on the hapless poor and the deprived, most of them slaves, and subjected them to harsh and unbearable persecution. So savage that some of them lost their lives as a result of beating and privations. Abu Bakr interceded for some and bought 7 of such most distressed slaves, of them being a woman subjected to serve and hard labor, and freed them all. Quite a few had lost their lives but none rescinded and turned away from the faith they chose. The Prophet was sorely distressed at the plight of the Muslims and advised them to immigrate to Abyssinia. 80 Muslims left to take refuge in Abyssinia, led by Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, his cousin. It was during the 5th year of the Prophet's mission. Negus, the Christian king of Abyssinia, received them with kindness. The Quraysh rushed a deputation to get their extradition, but the king refused after giving them a fair hearing, and assured the Muslims of his continuous protection. In the 7th year of the Prophet's mission, the Quraysh formed a league to impose a social and economic boycott of the descendants of B. Hashim and B. Muttalib, to which the Prophet belonged. The deed was hung in the middle of the Kaaba to remind all the other Arab tribes of their nefarious obligation. The 2 tribes of B. Hashim and B. Muttalib, whose chief was Abu Talib, the uncle of Muhammad, had not joined the new faith but continued to protect his nephew in this hour of distress and trial, spoke of him with great admiration and appreciation of the sublimity of Muhammad's character and his divine mission, and asked B. Hashim and B. Muttalib to protect Muhammad against the Quraysh. The 2 clans of B. Hashim and B. Muttalib, both Muslims and the idolaters, concentrated themselves at one point for safety and security instead of living dispersed to become an easy target to the persecutors. They all shifted to the quarter of Abu Talib, the patriarch of the Kaaba, on the eastern skirts of Mecca. For over 2 years they bravely faced hardship and privation. During the sacred months when warfare is prohibited, Muhammad would go out and preach. They did not remain friendless altogether, for many from Quraysh and other tribes would secretly or even openly violate the ban and blockade supervised by the leaders of Quraysh. Overtaken by a sense of shame, some elders and some of those who had affixed their name to the deed took the initiative and gathered together in the Kaaba and decided to revoke the boycott. Abu Jahl and the other hostile leaders were looking on. The deed was brought out. It was found eaten up by moth, leaving only the name of God. In the 11th year of the Prophet's mission, Abu Talib, the venerable patriarch of Kaaba, the uncle and protector of Muhammad, fell ill and his condition was grave. The Quraysh were in a state of panic, fearing that Hamza, a brother of Abu Talib, and Ammar, a notable, both fearless and powerful, may not get the upper hand of the Quraysh. Now resolved themselves to visit Abu Talib at his deathbed, both as a mark of courtesy and evolve some sort of conciliation and compromise. The notables included Abu Lahab, the prospective claimant to the office of Abu Talib, Abu Sufyan, Utbah and Shayba, and they all went in a delegation. They said, "You know your rank with us, and now that you are at the point of death we are deeply concerned on your account. You know that the trouble that exists between us and your nephew, so call him and let us make an agreement that he will leave us alone and we will have ours." When Muhammad came, Abu Talib said, "Nephew, these notables have come to you that they may give you something and take something from you." Muhammad answered, "Yes. "You may give me one word by which you can rule the Arabs and subject the Persians to you." Abu Jahl said, "You, and 10 words." And Muhammad said, "You must say 3 is no God but Allah, and you must repudiate what you worship beside him." They clapped their hands and said, "Do you want to make all the gods into one God, Muhammad? That would be an extraordinary thing." Then they said to one another, "This fellow is not going to give us anything you want, so go and continue with the religion of your fathers until God judge between us." So saying, they all departed. Abu Talib died, and soon, Bibi Khadija, Raa, the wife of Muhammad, SAW, passed away. She was the first to proclaim her belief in the new faith and stood by her husband all her life throughout the turbulent years of his prophetic mission in Mecca. It was a year of mourning, 619 AC. The ancient Arabs had 7 temples, dedicated to the 7 planets. They also worshipped goddesses, 3 of them mentioned in the Holy Quran under the names, Al-Lat, Al-Uzza, and the planet Venus, the special idol of Mecca, Al-Manat, a sacred stone. There were also 360 idols, dedicated for each of the 360 days. About the moral and social depravity of the Arabs at the time to the advent of Muhammad, it can better be described in the words of Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, the leader of the Muslim emigrants, in the court of Negus, the king of Abyssinia. He said, "O king, we were in state of ignorance and immorality, worshipping idols, eating carrion, committing all sorts of iniquity. We honored no relative and assisted no relative or neighbor. The strong among us exploited the weak. Then God sent us a prophet, one of our own people, whose lineage, truthfulness, loyalty and purity were well known to us. He called us to worship one God alone and to repudiate all the stones and idols which we and our ancestors used to worship. He commanded us always to tell the truth, remain true to trust and promise, to assist the relative, to be good to neighbors, to abstain from blood and things forbidden, and to avoid fornication, perjury and false witness. He commanded us not to rob the wealth of the orphans and falsely to accuse the married women. He ordered us to worship God alone and never to associate any other being with him. To hold prayers, to fast and to pay zakat, the poor tax. Explaining the 5 pillars of Islam. We believed in him and what he brought to us from God and followed him in what he enjoined and forbade. Our people, however, tried to sway us away from our religion and persecuted us and inflicted upon us great suffering that we might re-enter into the immoral practices of old. As they vanquished and berated us unjustly and made life intolerable for us, we chose you and your country to live under your protection, justice and peace. Thereupon, the Negus asked, "Will you show us some of the revelations which your prophet claims to have come to him from God?" Ja'far said, "Yes," and recited to the Negus the verses from the chapter, Maryam, beginning from the following verses. Mary, therefore, pointed to the child as her only answer. Her people asked, "How can we inquire of the infant in cradle?" At this Jesus spoke, "I am the servant of God to whom he has given the book, and whom he has blessed and commissioned with prophethood, whom he has enjoined holding the prayer and giving the zakat as long as he lives. My mother is innocent and I am neither unjust nor evil. Peace be upon me on the day I was born, and the day I shall die, and on the day I shall be resurrected." When the patriarchs heard the statement conforming as it did the message of the Evangel, they were pleasantly surprised and said, "These words must have sprung from the same fountainhead from which the words of our Master Jesus Christ have sprung." The obstinate pagans refused to listen to reason and convert to sanity and righteousness and continued to harass and humiliate the Prophet, and, in the 7th year of his ministry, they imposed a social and economic boycott on the Prophet and his clan, the B. Hashim and B. Muttalib, which lasted for over 2 years until it was revoked through the intercession of a saner element of the elders. At least, a ray of hope appeared when a small band of 12 of the proselytes from the city of Yathrib, Madinah, pledged their fidelity of the Prophet and entered the new faith, and then, the new faith had taken roots in Madinah. The following year, 622 AC, witnessed the blossoming of the new faith in Medina when 70 Muslims, representing the two major tribes, Aus and Khazraj, came in a body to Mecca on the occasion of the pilgrimage and pledged their fidelity to the Prophet and invited him to their city to live in peace and dignity and full freedom to preach, and they swore to defend him and the new faith, accepting all the risks involved. In the history of Islam, this event is called the Second Pledge of Aqaba. The Prophet recited several passages from the Holy Quran inviting all those present to the service of God and dwelt upon the blessings of the new dispensation. The former pledge was repeated, that they would worship none but God, that they would observe the precepts of Islam, that they would obey Muhammad in all that was right, and defend him and his, even as they would their women and children. And they said, if we die in the cause of God, what shall be our reward? Happiness in the hereafter was reply. Pertinently, one of them said, O Apostle, we have ties with other men, he meant the Jews, and if we sever them, perhaps when we have done that and God will have given you victory, you will return to your people and leave us? The Apostle smiled and said, Nay, blood is blood and blood not to be paid for. I am of you and you are of me. I will war against them that war against you and be at peace with those at peace with you. The Apostle stood by that promise and passed away to his eternal abode amidst them. Even after he had entered Mecca triumphantly without resistance, he returned to Medina, leaving a governor to look after the affairs of Mecca. When the Quraysh came to know of the pledge and allegiance the people of Medina concluded with the Apostle, they decided to kill the Apostle. The mode decided upon was to choose from different families a number of courageous men, should sheathe their swords in the bosom of Muhammad simultaneously so that the responsibility of the deed might rest on all, rendering Muhammad's clan too weak to avenge it. When all was arranged, the Archangel Gabriel warned the Apostle. The Quraysh surrounded Muhammad's house one night and kept a night-long vigil, but providentially the Apostle made good his escape, leaving Ali on his bed, and arrived safely in Medina, where he was given a right royal reception. The day of his arrival marks the commencement of the Islamic calendar, and Islam took off, and within a decade, the entire peninsula of Arabia converted to Islam and their social fabric transformed metamorphically, and within the next 5 years Islam emerged as a world religion and a world power, before which the Persian Empire disappeared and the Byzantine Empire crumbled and the concept of kingship and divine right demolished, establishing the principal people's rule by consent and sovereignty of God as the foundation and guiding principle of Islamic polity. Indeed, this was the greatest revolution in the history of civilization. Muhammad, SAW, did not claim miracles to establish his claim to prophethood. The only miracle he claimed was the literary excellence of the language in which the Quran delivered its message, its style and diction inimitable by humans, especially when the majesty and attributes of God are described, sublime and magnificent. 1. And to this miracle did Muhammad himself chiefly appeal for the confirmation of his mission, publicly challenging the most eloquent men in Arabia, which was at that time stocked with thousands whose sole study and ambition it was to excel in elegance of style and composition, to produce even a single chapter that might be compared with it. I will mention but one instance, out of several, to show that this book was really admired for the beauty of its composition by those who must be allowed to have been competent judges. A poem of Labid ibn Rabia, one of the greatest wits in Arabia of Muhammad's time, being fixed up on the gate of the temple of Mecca, an honor allowed to none but the most esteemed performance. None of the other poets durst offer anything of their own in competition with it, but the second chapter of the Quran being fixed up soon after, Labid himself, then an idolater, on reading the first verses only, was struck with admiration, and immediately professed the religion taught thereby, declaring that such words could proceed from an inspired person only. 1. Regarding the purity of the scripture, Holy Quran, Sir William Muir, another noted biographer of the Prophet, observes, there is probably in the world no other work which has remained 12 centuries, now 14 centuries, with so pure a text, and it is our belief that it will so continue to remain forever, a fact which verifies the following prophecy mentioned in the Holy Quran. God says, "We have surely sent down the Quran and we certainly preserve the same from corruption." The greatness of Muhammad, the achievements and accomplishments of Muhammad, may peace be upon him, are by itself a miracle, living miracle for all time to come. For 13 years he preached to a pagan people steeped in idolatry and vice, suffered the worst persecution but bore it all with superhuman patience and dignity, remaining steadfast in his faith in his mission, blazed the message of God throughout the peninsula, and then he was forced to emigrate under the threat of death. He settled in Medina, where he emerged as the founder of a state, too, a republic, as against the age-old concept of kingship, which means dynastic rule by divine right. He was an apostle of God, but the state he founded was not a theocracy, and he did not name a successor. Perforce, he had to fill the role of a warrior for the survival of his faith. He fought in self-defense, and in the process, he conquered and he transformed the pagan warrior tribes into a noblest spirituals brotherhood, transcending the barriers of race and color and territorial barriers, emerging on the world scene as the greatest civilizing force, dominating half of the then known world in the course of 10 years, heralding a new era, a new civilization in the history of mankind. Islam, the religion he preached, he proclaimed, is not a new religion. It is the continuation of the religion of Abraham, the religion of the forefather of mankind Adam, the religion professed by Moses and Jesus Christ. Equality, liberty and fraternity were no mere slogans, they were a living reality in the life of the faithful. His last sermon, delivered from the Mount Arafat on the occasion of his last pilgrimage in the 10th year of Hijrah, 632 AC, he proclaimed, "Ye people, listen to my words, for I know not whether another year will be vouchsafed to me after this year to find myself amongst you at this place. Your lives and property are sacred and inviolable amongst one another until ye appear before your Lord, as the day and this month is sacred for all, and, remember, ye shall have to appear before your Lord, who shall demand from you an account of all your action. Ye people, ye have rights over your wives, and your wives have rights over you. Treat your wives with kindness and love. Verily you have taken them on the security of God. Keep always faithful to the trust reposed in you, and avoid sins. Usury is forbidden. The debtor shall return only the principal, and the beginning will be made with the loans of my uncle Abbas son of Abdul Muttalib, and your slaves. See that ye feed them with such food as ye eat yourself, and clothe them with the stuff ye wear, and if they commit a fault ye are not inclined to forgive, and then part from them, for they are the servants of the Lord, and are not to be harshly treated. Ye people, listen to my words and understand the same. Know that all Muslims are brothers unto one another." 1, 2, quoted, Sale, cited by Sir Said Ahmed Khan. Ye are one brotherhood. Nothing which belongs to another is lawful unto his brother, unless freely given out of good will. Guard yourself from committing injustice. Let him that is present tell it unto him that is absent. The same day, after he had said the mid-afternoon prayers, Prophet Muhammad, SAW, received the last revelation. Today have I perfected your religious law for you and fulfilled my favor to you, and it has been my good pleasure to choose Islam for you as your religion. V/3 Ma'idah, and he recited this revelation to the congregation. He acquitted himself well by superhuman patience and perseverance, and God's pleasure was the crowning glory of his apostolic mission in his own lifetime. His closet companion of the cave, Abu Bakr, who succeeded the Prophet to his temporal role as the constitutional ruler or the Republic of Medina, realized that with the completion of the divine message, the Prophet's life was soon to come to a close. The Prophet passed away to his eternal abode after 3 months in the 11th year of the Hijra calendar, corresponding to 8th of June, 632 AD. Edward Gibbon and Simon Ickley, History of the Sassan Empire, p/54, has observed, "It is not the propagation but the permanency of his religion that deserves our wonder. The same pure and perfect impression which he engraved at Mecca and Medina is preserved after the revolutions of 12 centuries, now 14 centuries, by the Indian, the African and the Turkish proselytes of the Quran. The Mohammedans have uniformly withstood the temptation of reducing the object of their faith and devotion to a level with the senses and imagination of man. I believe in one God and Muhammad the Apostle of God, is the simple and invariable profession of Islam. The intellectual image of the deity has never been degraded by any visible idol, the honors of the Prophet have never transgressed the measure of human virtue, and his living precepts have restrained the gratitude of his disciples within the bounds of reason and religion. I acknowledge the debt of gratitude to all those authors from whose writings I have gained much and quoted profusely. Fazal Karim. Chapter 1. Arabia, Geographical Position. The Arabian Peninsula is situated at the confluence of three continents, Africa, Asia and Europe. It is bounded on the west by the Red Sea, on the east by the Persian Gulf and that of Oman, on the south by the Indian Ocean, on the north it reaches the ancient Babylon and Syria, separated by the narrow Isthmus of Suez. The north-western side adjoins with the land of Israelites, known by the name of Canaan. The Greeks called it Phoenicia and in the Middle Ages, it was called Palestine. Rectangular in shape, it is over 1,000 kilometers long and as much wide. It is a vast expanse of desert, devoid of rivers, with little rainfalls and vast stretches of desert. From the south, west winds blow at high speeds, forming and blowing off sand dunes which are capable of burying whole armies or caravans. Nature has, however, graced the land with bounties too. There are steppes too with exceedingly fertile patches of land cultivated for thousands of years, studded with thriving villages and towns inhabited by settled populations. Such fertile territories are to be found along the borders of the peninsula. In the south-west is Yemen, called in antiquity by the name Felix, Arabia or Fertile Arabia. In the south is Hadramaut, the home of frankincense and myrrh, highly prized throughout the world. The central Arabian highland of Najd with its isolated mountains, long stream valleys, called wadis. Its steppe on which graze the finest Arabian horses, considered there, noblest in the world, and Yamama, lying south-west, considered the central granary of Arabia, more than enough of grain for the entire population of the peninsula. Hijaz, the part of Arabia lying between Syria and Yemen, is glorified by Kaaba, the house of God built by the Prophet Abraham, PBU, and the Prophet Ismail, PBU, the ancestor of Prophet Muhammad, SAW, by virtue of which the city of Mecca came to be regarded as the center of pilgrimage, and all Arabs venerated Kaaba, and visited the city annually for the performance of all rituals connected with Hajj and Umrah with utmost devotion. In the pre-Islamic days 360 idols were placed in Kaaba representing the many deities the pagan Arabs worshipped. The city of Mecca was ideally situated at a small distance of 40 miles from the port town of Jeddah. Wherever there is a great gathering from all nooks and corners of the country, commerce thrives. Hijaz is a mountainous country, runs along the coast of the Red Sea and includes Medina also, situated at a distance of 370 miles, 4 days' journey. The distance from Mecca to Sana'a or Aden, 30 days' journey, to Cairo, 31 days' journey. Mecca is situated between Yemen on the right and Syria on the left at an equidistance of 30 days' journey. Travel and transportation of men and merchandise was by camel, an animal of prodigious strength and stamina which capable of taking a weight of a ton with ease, journeying without water for a week, is rightly called the ship of the desert. Distance between the main cities and trading centers are given above to provide a fairly good idea of the felicity and flow of commerce and communications between Mecca, situated in a desolate and barren basin. Arabs were great traders, and the Meccans particularly were adept in this art, trading with the outside world as far off as India through the ports of Aden and Jeddah. They had very good relations with Abyssinia. Mecca became the center of trade and commerce, and that brought riches and renown to the city. There was no organized state, every family was autonomous. Quraysh were the largest and the most powerful tribe, and they gained pre-eminence over the rest of the Arabs tribes by virtue of being the custodians of Kaaba, the first house of God, built by the Prophet Abraham and his son Prophet Ismail, the biblical prophet Samuel, Together, the patriarchal functions and custodianship vested in the family of Banu Hashim, its chief Abdul-Muttalib for the fifth generation, and Abdul-Muttalib was the grandfather of Muhammad, SAW, the Prophet of Islam. Islamic Arab civilization. Professor Joseph Hell, a German Orientalist, in a monograph, giving an account of the Arab civilization of the pre-Islamic era, says, 3. That Arabia was the original home of the Semites, in an opinion shared by many and, indeed not without good reason, that the old civilized Babylonia, as early as the 3rd millennium before Christ, received its ruling population from Arabia is another widespread belief, and innumerable inscriptions on the Arabian rocks testify to a civilization and a settled government there in pre-Christian times, not in any way inferior to any civilization and government of that age. Numerous inscriptions which, during the last 70 years, have been found on the ruins in South Arabia and which have been more and more thoroughly investigated tell us all of the existence of two kingdoms there in pre-Christian times. The long-maintained view that two kingdoms continued, side by side, till the late Grecian period is no longer sustainable in the face of the researches by Edward Glaser, which show that the kingdom of Ma'in was destroyed and absorbed that of Saba. Speaking of this kingdom, the oldest reports refer to its special indigenous produce, incense and myth, highly valued in Egypt, and to its felicitous position on the Red Sea, marking it from time immemorial, as a commercial center. We know, further, how it extended its influences up to Gaza on the Mediterranean, and how, all along right up to the sea, commercial stations and depots for storage of arms dotted the route. In all these respects the kingdom of Saba is scarcely distinguishable from that of Man, only the former assume a greater and greater prominence about the time when the position of the south-western portion of Arabia was becoming shaky and insecure in the world of commerce. The boat service introduced by the Ptolemies on the Red Sea did but little harm to the commercial interests of the Sabaeans in the north, for they continued as before to supply incense to all the great temples in Egypt. World-renowned was the wealth of Saba. The Abyssinians had accepted Christianity in the 4th century AC and in consequence received support and aid from the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantine Empire with its capital at Constantinople, and they were the first foreigners to rule over Yemen. The Arabs and the very numerous Jews united to expel the Abyssinians with the help of the Persian Empire. It came for a while, under King Abu Nawas sometime. In 520 AC he converted to Judaism, and under the instigation of the Jews savagely persecuted the Christians, burning them alive. The Byzantine emperor was angered by the relentless persecution of the Christians and asked Negus, the king of Abyssinia, to rescue the Christians. Soon an Abyssinian army landed on the shores of Yemen under the command of Harith. Zanawas was killed in the battle that ensued, 535 AC. Aba succeeded as victory, and it was under Aba, the Abyssinians tried to conquer Hijaz in 569 AC with an avowed object to destroy Kaaba, but met with a terrible disaster. The Abyssinian rule over Yemen lasted for about 50 years when it was overthrown by the desert Arabs, who restored to power the Himyarite dynasty with the help of the Persian emperor. Subsequently, Hadramaut, Murrah and Oman were added to the Persian Empire. Yemen was now under a Persian governor and was taxed according to the Persian system, 570 AC. 3. Precisely as the Christian Abyssinian rulers sought alliance with the Byzantines, so the Arab, Jewish government sought the protection of the Persians, the then great pagan power. In the war that now broke out, Christianity triumphed and South Arabia became a fresh and Abyssinian province. 3. C. The Arab Civilization by Joseph Hell, translated by S. Kuda p/2. 3. Quoted from The Arab Civilization by Joseph Hell, p/6. The Persian, however, never lost sight of this rich portion of Arabia, and in 570 AC they felt that the time had come for an attack upon Yemen. In shining array the Arab folk, embittered against the Christian government, joined the Persian army, and thus, for the second time, the Abyssinians were driven out of South Arabia. South Arabia now received a Persian governor, and was taxed according to the Persian system. But as the Persians, more eager for a share in the wealth of the land than bent on setting up an oppressive rule, the inhabitants felt satisfied with the new order of things. Nevertheless, it meant loss of national honor. South Arabia was thus the gateway through which the two world powers, the Eastern Empire and Persian, entered into the Arabian Peninsula. In the North Syro-Arabian desert barred their passage, but there was no such hindrance in the south. Despite, however, close contact and the capacity of the South Arabians to assimilate culture, these powers failed to impress their stamp upon the South Arabian civilization. What civilization we find there, is their own unaffected indigenous civilization. In the long narrow strip of land in North Arabia facing the Persian Empire and the Byzantine Empire was the kingdom of Hira, situated on the Euphrates, capitulated to Arabs in 12 AH along with the ancient Babylon and Kiffa. Persian Empire was still rich and powerful, comprising within the whole of Persia, Bactria, most of Central Asian provinces, Iraq, Mesopotamia and Bactria, as also Sindh and Baluchistan. The Persian governor of Chaldee fought hard but was defeated with heavy losses. A global view of Islam at the outset of 6th and 7th century AD, Prophet Muhammad, SAW, is a historical person, every moment of his life, lineage, birth, adolescence and youth, first character up to the 40th year of his life, the circumstances of the first revelation and God's grace in choosing him as his messenger and prophet. 13 years of his preaching among the pagan Arabs of Mecca and success of his mission after many trials and tribulations, making the first phase of his ministry, and thereafter, his flight to Medina heralding the beginning of a new era and the ascendance of Islam in the next 10 years, establishing its supremacy over the whole of the Arab Peninsula and, in the following next 10 years, carrying its message and banner from the banks of Nile to the borders of China in the Far East, have been recorded in his lifetime in minute detail, and this is the hallmark of the Prophet of Islam in the entire history of religion in the world. But most regrettably, it is not so with Jesus Christ, whose life and teachings are lost in the midst of antiquity. Not even enough detail to fill a page could be found in spite of the best efforts of a whole band of eminent European Christian scholars known for their piety and labors. One such eminent scholar, M. Renan, in his Vida Jesus admits, only with great difficulty can one arrive at so much as one page of history about the actual personage who was called Jesus. There does not appear any hint in the Old and the New Testaments of the Holy Bible. The very word Chris is not Hebrew name, it is derived from the Greek Christos. There appears no hint either in the Bible. What little we know is from the allusions to Isa son of Mary in the Holy Quran, on whom God bestowed the book, Injil, the book and wisdom, the law and the gospel, Surah 3/45-49, Holy Quran. The Muslims respect him as the most honored of the prophets, and it is incumbent on them to believe in his teachings. But the situation is that the Bible is translated not from the original Hebrew but Greek, and then into Latin and then into English. The Bible, both the Old Testament and the New Testament, are not trustworthy, as has been admitted by the biblical scholars. Quoted from Islam and Christianity by Dr.F.R. Ansari, p/48. Christianity in the 6th and 7th century AD. Decline of the Roman Empire set in, 300 AD. The Senate was confirmed to the city of Rome, entrusting as associate, Constantine, who moved his capital to Greek city of Byzantium on the coast of the Black Sea, 330 AD, renaming it in his own honor, Constantinople. Thus, the Eastern and the Western Roman empires separated, and the Eastern Empire came to be the Byzantine Empire. Yet, Christianity had not taken the world by storm. At the time of the death of Jesus, there were scarcely 100 Christians converted from Judaism. The new faith was preached to the Gentiles, and it began to spread. In 324 AD, Emperor Constantine established Christianity as a state religion by an edict. By this time it had split up into several idolatrous creeds: Christianity and Judaism. There were Zoroastrians who worshipped fire, but they never enjoyed political power. The Persian Empire was established by Cyrus in the 6th century BC. He united Media with Persia. Greek and Parthian ruled over Persia successively for 4 centuries until the native Sassanid dynasty took over in 242 AD. It comprised the whole of Persia, Bactria, besides Iraq and Mesopotamia, Central Asia to the borders of Tartary and India up to the Indus. An excerpt from A History of the Indian People by D.P. Singhal, p/133, will surely capture the imagination of the readers, which provides historical evidence that the people from Egypt to Central Asia were a unified whole in spite of the vast disparities, separated in distance and time. He writes, a pictorial form of writing which is yet to be deciphered was in use in the Indus Valley, 3000 BC. It resembled in essential features those of Sumer, Egypt and Minoan Crete. A number of seals of Indian design and workmanship have been found at various sites in the Euphrates and Tigris areas. Knobbed pottery vases and cotton came from India, and the discovery of Harappan manufactures, situated in Punjab, Pakistan, indicates commercial contacts. Trade between Indus Valley and Euphrates seems to have been very brisk. As a result, there were similarities between these cultures, but each had its distinctive character determined by local conditions. There was a fundamental unity of ideas between them, presumably the result of commercial contact between India and the West, despite political fluctuations, and with continued unbroken until the decline of the Roman Empire. While the link goes to remote antiquity, there is definite evidence that the earliest known link between the Indian and Mediterranean cultures. According to Jewish chronicles, as early as 975 BC, the king of Tyre, Hiram, acting jointly with Solomon of Judea, had sent his fleet to bring ivory, apes, peacocks and precious stones from the port of Ophir, which may or may not have been a port on the western Indian Ocean, but unmistakably the objects imported were Indian origin. During the period of Vedic civilization, 1500 BC onwards, close resemblance between language and mythology, religious traditions and social institutions of Indians and Iranians on the one hand, and those of the Greeks, Romans, Celts, Germans and Slave on the other are noticed. The Hittite kings of Mitanni, kings belonging to the 15th or 16th century BC, bore Aryan names, and the names of the Vedic gods, Indra, Mitra, Varuna and Asvins, whom they called by the Vedic title, Nasatya, in their cuneiform inscriptions. They based on linguistic evidence. The gods, for example, of heaven, earth and sun, were common to the ancient Greeks and Indians, and they were primarily the forces of nature. These arrangements indicate that the two people must have been in close contact at some early period or had a common origin. But neither had any recollection of those times. They met in the 6th century BC as strangers within the Persian Empire, which at that time extended from Indus to Ionian Greece. Indeed, mankind's were one family in the beginning. Gautama Buddha. The founder of Buddhism was born in about 250 BC in the present-day Nepal. Son of a Scythian king, the Indians call him Sakya Muni. Buddhism is not a religion, it is a social order, and the Hindus dubbed him an atheist, Nastik. 273 to 232 BC. Asoka converted himself to Buddhism and extended royal patronage. Buddhism was a revolt against the Vedic religion and the caste system imposed by the Brahmanical religion. Buddha rejected the Vedas. He left no book. He was deeply moved by the suffering he perceived all around. He taught that the only way to triumph over suffering is through piety and attain nirvana, relief from the unending chain of birth and rebirth. His followers established different creeds and raised Buddha to godhood, his images adoring the temples. Harsha, 606–647 AD, was the second king who extended royal patronage. After the death of Harsha, Buddhists were persecuted and Buddhism eliminated and absorbed into the Hindu fold by recognizing Buddha as the incarnation of the Hindu god Vishnu. 1200 AD, India, the Gupta period, considered to be the Golden Age of India, had ended in 480 AD after 160 years of reign. The Huns invaded Persia and India in the 5th and 6th century AD. They had completely destroyed every vestige of Gupta period and the brilliant civilization that existed. In 606 AD Harshavardhan was able to drive out the barbarians and consolidate his rule, but he died young in 647 AD and India relapsed into anarchy and chaos and numerous petty kingdoms sprang up. With the death of Harshavar, Buddhism lost its royal patronage. Although Harshavar was not himself a Buddhist, he was partially prone and extended royal patronage. Brahmanism had grown stronger and Buddhists were ruthlessly persecuted. So much so that Buddhism was nearly exterminated. The Huns destroyed the Western Roman Empire and sacked Rome in 476 AD, and the Eastern Roman Empire stepped in as the heir of the heritage of Rome. The Emperor Constantine had adopted Christianity and established Christianity as the state religion in 324 AD. Thus, Christianity triumphed over his bitterest foe, Judaism. But on the spiritual plane, it was no gain. Sects in Christianity multiplied and Jesus Christ, who preached monotheism and condemned idolatry, was himself raised to sonship attributes divinity and ultimately, elevated to co-equal with his images adoring the churches. Emergence of Islam, arrival of the Prophet Muhammad, SAW, in Medina on September 27, 622 AD, which marks the commencement of the Hijra, signifies the ascendance of Islam as a world religion and a world power. Arabia was facing on its north two great and powerful empires, the Persian Empire and the Byzantine Empire, and they clashed in 624 AD when the Persian Emperor Khusro attacked the Byzantine Empire, occupied Egypt and Syria, sacked Jerusalem and carried away the Holy Cross. It was at this time that the Prophet Muhammad, SAW, foretold the victory of the Roman, Byzantine, Empire and the doom of the Persian Empire. His prophecy was fulfilled when the Romans rallied forth and liberated Jerusalem 7 years later in 630 AD. This prophecy coincided with the victory of Muslims over the Quraysh in the Battle of Badr. This fulfillment of the prophecy won many converts to Islam. Spiritual condition of Christianity at the time of the birth of the Prophet of Islam. Whilst the Prophet of Islam was yet an infant, one of the most virtuous emperor who ever ascended the throne of Byzantine was massacred, with his children and wife, with fearful tortures at the instance of a Christian monarch. The emperor, Justinian, was dragged from his sanctuary, and his 5 sons were successively murdered before his eye, and this tragic scene closed with the execution of the emperor himself. The empress and her daughters were subjected to nameless cruelties and then beheaded on the very ground which had been stained with the blood of the poor Emperor Maurice. The ruthless treatment meted out to the friends, companions of the imperial victim, serves as an index to the morality of the Byzantine Christians. Their eyes were pierced, their tongues were torn from the root, their hands and feet were amputated, some expired under the lash, others in the flames, others again were transfixed with arrows. A simple, speedy death, says Gibbon, was mercy which they could rarely obtain. The condition of Constantinople under Justinian, the Christian and the glorified legislator, is the best index to the demoralized and degraded state of society all over Christendom. Social debasement of the Arab society, social habits of the Arab in the pre-Islamic Arabia was simply revolting and shameful. They were addicted to drinking and gambling. Usury was widespread, adultery was not considered a vice. Prostitution was rampant and brothels were maintained. Sons would inherit fathers' wives and female infanticide was common and widespread. Tribal prejudices were strong and war was a sport of them. A most trivial incident could touch off a war and blood feuds could linger on for generations. Such was the state of their moral degradation. 5. R.V.C. Bodley has attempted a general survey of the world at the time of the Prophet in his book The Messenger. He writes the Arabs did not command any respect in the 6th century world. As a matter of fact, no, none counted very much. It was a moribund period when the great empires of Eastern Empire and Western Asia had already been destroyed or were at the end of their imperial careers. It was indeed the darkest spot, but it had its own peculiarities, geographical, climatic, social and political. 5. In this limited area of Central Arabian, the existence of the Triangle of Mecca, Taif, Madinah seemed something providential. Mecca, desertic, deprived of water and amenities of agriculture, in physical features represented Africa and the burning Sahara. Scarcely 50 miles from there, Taif presented a picture of Europe and its frost. Madinah in north was not less fertile than even the most temperate of Asiatic countries like Syria. If climate has any influence of human character, this triangle, standing in the middle of the major hemisphere, was, more than any other region of the earth, a miniature reproduction of the entire world. And here was born a descendant of the Babylonian, modern Iraq, Abraham, and the Egyptian Hagar. Muhammad, SAW, a Meccan by origin and yet with stock related, both to Madinah and Taif from the point of view of religion. Arabia was idolatrous. Only a few individuals had embraced Christianity, Judaism and Mazdaism. They had preserved the right of the pilgrimage to the house of the one God, the Kaaba, an institution set up under divine inspiration by their ancestor Abraham, yet the 2,000 years that separated them from Abraham had caused to degenerate this pilgrimage into spectacle of a commercial fair and an occasion of senseless idolatry which, far from producing any good, only served to ruin their individual behavior, both social and spiritual, politically and economically. In spite of the comparative poverty and natural sources, Mecca was the most developed of the 3 points of the triangle. Of the 3, Mecca alone had a city-state, governed by a council of 10 hereditary chiefs who enjoyed a clear division of power, between the 10 principal families of the tribe of Quraysh: 1. A minister of foreign relations, 2. A minister guardian of the temple, 3. A minister of oracles, 4. A minister guardian of offerings to the temple, 5. One to determine the torts and damages payable, 6. A minister for the municipal council or parliament to enforce the decisions of the ministries, 7. A minister for military affairs, 8. Taxes to aid pilgrims, 9. Senate, 10. Justice in cases of tort. 5. Amir Ali, Spirit of Islam, cited from Edward Gibbon. 5. Quoted from Dr. M. Hamidullah, Introduction to Islam p/34. Justice in penal cases and guardianship of Kaaba were combined, and this ministry vested in the family of Banu Hashim, the family of the Prophet Muhammad, SAW. The Meccans were able to obtain permission from the neighboring empires and the king of Abyssinia to enter into agreements with the tribes that lined the caravan routes and transact import and export business. Such was the condition and state of affairs in Arabia when Muhammad, SAW, was born. Sanctity of Mecca. Mecca was declared a holy city of the pagan Arabs, and entry was closed to the Christians and Jews, without permission, and even when permission was given they were bound not to speak in Mecca about their religion. So there were no communities of Christians of Jews in Mecca. Political condition in Arabia. Thus at the beginning of the 7th century AC, Central Arabia was not even externally organized as a state. This makes it all the more remarkable that precisely that portion of Arabia which was wholly uninfluenced by the neighboring civilizations should be the issuing point of the great Islamic movement. An ingenious theory explains the desiccation of Arabia as the causes which, in conjunction with the rise of Islam, led to the world historical revolution. The conditions of Inner Arabia, favorable to Islam, according to our present knowledge, may be thus summarized: corresponding to the double nature of the country, its inhabitants fall into groups, the settled and the nomadic. The contrast between the two, however, is not very acute. In many things the town folks betray their nomadic origin, and share the striking characteristics of the Bedouins. For instance, to suit the changing season, it is not rare for settled townsfolk to intimate and wander from one place to another. On the other hand, the nomads are no more gypsies who roam about for the sheer love of roaming. The lands which they occupy with their herds are always selected on account of their fertility and good pasturage, and wherever arable is found in the great steppes, there the nomadic cultivators settle, and, similarly, wherever a rich spring draws the shepherd and the caravan, there gradually grows up a market place, a village, even a town. In spite there were in Central Arabia large towns and villages whose inhabitants, like the nomads, cherished tribal ties and upheld tribal rights. Simple indeed were the legal ideas of the Bedouin. The first and foremost was his right to personal freedom, and this, notwithstanding the tie of kinship which united the individual to the family, to a tribe, to the South or North Arabian group. Since time immemorial the struggle for existence in Arabia has centered round water and pasturage. These struggles destroyed the sense of national unity and developed an incurable particularism, each tribe deeming itself self-sufficient, and regarding the rest as its legitimate victims for murder, robbery and plunder. Blood money was set at about 100 female camels. Usually they called for blood of the offender, and when excitement became particularly great the blood revenge extended even to the members of the whole tribes to which the offender belonged. If the struggle for existence split the Bedouins up into fragments and made them hostile to each other, the common fight against stubborn and malignant nature drew them closer together, and the result was the one duty to which the old Bedouin acknowledged and which they carried to a fault: hospitality. Not unlike the oldest South and North Arabian states which waxed and waned with the rise and fall of commerce, in Central Arabia, too, commerce accompanied culture and civilization. The Arabs had always a passion for aromatics. They imported these from India. From India also came via Aden, the best swords, and from Abyssinia by ship, came slaves. In addition to the import of these articles which were distributed to all parts of Arabia, there was a heavy inland trade also in native goods. Saudi Arabia supplied superfine leather and valuable materials for dress. North Arabia supplied corn and weapons. At Al-Hira flourished a saddle industry. But how was trade possible amidst plunder and feud? And how, again, in view of the territorial peculiarity of Arabia, where between cultivated lands the desert intervened, making intercourse difficult and well-nigh impossible? Against the perils of insecurity the Arabs, from time immemorial, sought and found a remedy in the introduction of a holy truce. While 8 months were allotted to the savage sport of feuds, 4 were set apart for complete peace and cessation of hostilities. Of these 4 months, 3 followed in unbroken succession: the 11th, the 12th, and the 4th month of the year. The 4th fell in the middle of the year and called a sudden halt to strife. While the 3 successive months of the peace were reserved for religion, the 4th was set apart for commerce. For the one or the other purpose the Bedouins of Arabia came to the inhospitable but nonetheless easily accessible Hijaz, for Hijaz was accessible alike from the south, from the north, and from the west. Every tribe, in its own territorial limits, had one or several holy stones, trees or springs, sufficient to satisfy its religious needs. But as far back as memory can go, Hijaz has served as a meeting place of many tribes, and as such the sacred things there have borne the same relation as local things do to things national. This may well have been the reason why black stone in Mecca, set up in a cube-shaped building, called the Kaaba, acquired more and more spreading reputation, and the ceremonies connected therewith and the rest of the sacred things in Mecca a wider recognition. Abdullah, son of Abdul Muttalib, father of Muhammad, SAW, Abdul Muttalib, the guardian of Kaaba, was 70 years old when Abu arrived in Hijaz with a vowed intention of destroying the Kaaba, and his son Abdullah was 24 years. Abdul Muttalib visited the chief of the tribe of Zora, and asked for the hand of his daughter Amina for his son Abdullah. The marriage was solemnized, and according to the Arab custom, Abdullah lived for a few days with bride's family in Medina. Soon after the marriage, Abdullah left for Syria on a business trip, and in the meantime, Amina moved to Mecca. At the time of Abra's march on the city of Mecca determined to destroy Kaaba, Abdullah was away on his business errand. Amina was pregnant. Mecca was delivered from sacrilege by the Abyssinian army. The caravan returned from Syria, but Abdullah had not returned. After anxious inquiries, Abdul Muttalib dispatched his eldest son Harith to Madinah to accompany his ailing brother Abdullah. When Harith arrived in Madinah, he learnt that Abdullah had expired after a brief illness and was buried. This was a great tragedy for Amina. A few months after this tragedy she gave birth to Muhammad, SAW. Thus Muhammad was born an orphan. When she delivered her son, she named her son Ahmad. Abdul Muttalib was overjoyed to learn of the birth of grandson. He took the infant to Kaaba and after prayers, he named him Muhammad, the Praised One. According to the custom among the noble families of Mecca, he was entrusted to Halima, for suckling. Halima belonged to the tribe of Banu Sa'd, a tribe who are known for their chaste speech. Halima was happy for she found that the infant brought her luck and prosperity. Muhammad, SAW, lived in the care of his nurse for 2 years in the first instance and then extended to another 2 years. After 5 years of life in the desert among the Banu Sa'd, Muhammad, SAW, returned to his mother Amina. Abdul Muttalib loved his grandson dearly. His mother took him to Madinah to show him to her brothers, the Banu Najjar. Amina must have shown the lad his father's grave. When he grew up, Muhammad would tell his companions his reminiscences of his boyhood in the household of his uncles. Amina stayed for a month in Madinah, but on her return journey to Mecca, she died on the way at the village of Abwa, 23 miles south of Madinah. The bereaved child was brought to Mecca. 2 years later, when he was 8, his grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, now 80, died, leaving him under the protection of his son, Abu Talib. Chapter 2. A Prophet is Born. Birth of Muhammad, SAW. Evidently, the stage is set for the reception of a new order and a prophet for the emancipation of mankind and a new religion to provide guidance along a right path. Everywhere, all over the world, mankind was at turmoil, struggling against oppression, tyranny and religious persecution, sunk in debasing idolatry and receding back to the pagan past. It was at this critical juncture that Muhammad, SAW, was born in Mecca in the heart of the Arabian Peninsula, on Monday, the 12th day of Rabi' al-Awwal, corresponding to 20th of April, 571 AD, in the early hours of the morning. According to the Arab tradition, it was the year of the elephant 570 AD, propitiously, a sign of the divine grace. Muhammad, SAW, was born 55 days after the frustrated invasion of Hijaz by Aba, the Abyssinian governor of Yemen, who came with a formidable army including cavalry and elephants, an animal the Arabs had not seen, entered Hijaz and was camping near Mecca, with the avowed intention of destroying Kaaba. His raiding party had seized the Quraysh cattle's herds, including 100 camels belonging to Abdul Muttalib. The Meccas met in a council to consider the grave situation. It was found unwise to fight and they decided to evacuate the city and return to the surrounding hills. Abra sent for the nobles of Mecca. Abdul Muttalib, the patriarch of Kaaba, declared that he will not fight Abra. Abra was very much impressed by the deportment of the old patriarch, now 70 years old, and became friendly and asked him if he has a favor to seek. Abdul Muttalib asked for the return of the 100 camels the raiding party had seized. Abra was surprised and asked him why he had not implored him for the safety of Kaaba instead of return of his camels. Abdul Muttalib replied deftly that the camels are his property and Kaaba is the house of God who will take care of it. The camels were returned and the Arab chiefs returned to the city. Abdul Muttalib fervently prayed at Kaaba for the defense of the honor of Kaaba and the people of Mecca. Next morning, seated on the richly caparisoned rightly elephant, Abra marched toward Mecca. The Meccans had evacuated the city, taking refuge on the hilltops surrounding Mecca. But Abra's elephant knelt down in the vicinity of the city and would not budge. The sky grew black and a great swarm of birds appeared, swooping down and raining pebbles, spreading pestilence and death. Panic prevailed everywhere. The elephant refused to move and knelt down. The fighters scattered and fled. Abra retreated fast and died before he reached his capital Sanaa. The Kaaba was thus saved from destruction, and the people who were taking refuge on the surrounding hills returned in safety. This was something so very extraordinary an event that the Arabs started to call the year of the elephant in commemoration as their new calendar. This is no fable, a historical event, and there is a reference in the Holy Quran, Surah 105 al-Fil. Art thou not aware of how the Sustainer dealt with the army of the elephant? Did he not utterly confound their artful planning? Thus he let loose upon them great swarms of flying creatures which smote them with stone, hard blows of chastisement preordained, and caused them to become like a field of grain that has been beaten down to stubble. See the elephant, stone-hard blows is a metaphor. The earliest commentators stated that it was for the first time epidemic spotted fever appeared in Arabia. Allegorically, flying creatures were carriers of the strange infection that spreads fast. Whatever it is, the invading army was instantly stricken with natural forces and overtaken by doom. The event enhanced the esteem and reverence associated and with the offices of custodianship of the House of Kaaba which vested in Muhammad's SAW grandfather Abdul Muttalib, for the last 4 generations right from 400 AD. Thus, if the Kaaba had not been providentially saved from destruction by Abra the Abyssinian governor of Yemen backed by the might of the Byzantine Empire, perhaps history would never have unfolded a new revolution that is destined to change the face of the world for centuries to come. Abyssinian was a Christian kingdom since 4th centuries AD, and incidentally, it was Negus, the king of Abyssinia, who offered refuge to the persecuted bands of Muslims who sought asylum and protection from their pagan persecutor of Mecca. Muhammad's youth. Muhammad spent his boyhood and youth under the care of his uncle Abu Talib. Abu Talib was not rich, but he loved his nephew most. He led a caravan to Syria and Muhammad, a boy of 12, accompanied him. He worked as a herdsman too, as the prophets Moses and David of yore. In his youth he was modest and honest, free from vice. He grew up into manhood. There lived in the city a wealthy lady, who had developed business, and Abu Talib learnt that she was organizing a caravan. Abu Talib spoke to her recommending his nephew Muhammad for an assignment. She readily agreed. Muhammad was accompanied by her slave Maysara. The caravan made its way through the well-known routes and centers which were familiar to Muhammad. The trip earned handsome profits beyond her expectations. Muhammad was now 25 years old, handsome and noble, with reputation of being trustworthy. His upright character and charm won him the love of Khadijah. She expressed her desire to her lady friend, who took the lead in obtaining the acceptance of Muhammad, SAW. Khadijah was 40 years old. Their marriage was solemnized. This opened a new chapter in the life of Muhammad. Muhammad gave her a dowry, 20 female camels. He moved to her house. His esteem in the city was elevated, and his modesty, in manner and speech, made him lovable. Personality of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, SAW. According to the tradition of his companions, Muhammad, SAW, was distinguished by the beauty of his person, an outward gift which is seldom despised, except by those to whom it has been refused. Before he spoke, engaged on his side the affection of a public or private audience. They applauded his commanding presence, his majestic aspect, his piercing eye, his gracious smile, his flowing beard, his countenance that painted every sensation of his soul, and his gestures that enforced each expression of the tongue. In the familiar offices of life he scrupulously adhered to the grave and ceremonious politeness of his country. His respectful attention to the rich and powerful was dignified by his condescension and affability to the poorest citizens of Mecca. The frankness of his manner concealed the artifice of his views, and the habits of courtesy were imputed to personal friendship or universal benevolence. His memory was capacious and retentive, his wit easy and social, his imaginations sublime, his judgment clear, rapid and decisive. He possessed the courage both thought and action. Although his designs might gradually expand with his success, the first idea which he entertained of his divine mission bears the stamp of an original and superior genius. the son of Abdullah, was educated in the bosom of the noblest race, in the use of the purest dialect of Arabia. The fluency of his speech was corrected and enhanced by the practice of direct and seasonable silence. With these powers of eloquence, Muhammad was illiterate. His youth had never been instructed in the arts of reading and writing. The common ignorance exempted his from shame or reproach, but he was reduced to a narrow circle of existence, and deprived of those faithful mirrors which reflect to our mind the minds of sages and heroes. Yet the book of nature and man was open to his view. He compares the nations and the religions of the earth, discovers the weakness of the Persian and Roman monarchies, beholds with pity and indignation the degeneracy of the times, and resolves to unite less than one God and one king, the invincible spirit and primitive virtues of the Arabs. Our more accurate inquiry will suggest that the temples of the East, the two journeys of Muhammad, SAW, into Syria were confined to the fairs of Bosra and Damascus, that he was only 13 years of age when he accompanied the caravan of his uncle, and that his duty compelled him to return as soon as the disposal of the merchandise Khadijah. 6. Quoted from Edward Gibbon, Decline and Fall of Roman Empire Volume V, Traditionalist cited is Abdul Fida. p/233-34. In these hasty and superficial excursions the eye of genius might discern some objects invisible to his grosser companions, some fruits of knowledge might be east upon faithful soil, but his ignorance of the Syriac language must have checked his curiosity, and I cannot perceive in the life or writing, sayings, of Muhammad, SAW, that his prospect was far extended beyond the limits of the Arabian world. Muhammad, SAW, was unlettered. The Holy Quran refers to him as Ummi, meaning unlettered. Arabic language was only a spoken dialect at the time he was in his 40th year, writing just having been introduced. Only a very few knew how to write. If a miracle is called to attest his prophethood, is it not enough that born amongst a people bereft of learning and intellect, living in a desert, himself unlettered and unschooled, should preach a religion of lofty universal ideals and transform the Arabs into the most civilized race and the harbingers of a world civilization and culture in a course of 2 decades? Is it not a historical fact that the teachings of Islam inspired reformation of the Christian Church and elevated the Christian West into the modern civilization? The Holy Quran commanded the Prophet to announce, "Say, O men, I am sent unto you all, as the messenger of Allah, to whom belong to the dominion of the heavens and the earth. There is no God but He, it is He that giveth both life and death, so believe in Allah and His messenger, the unlettered prophets, who believeth in Allah and His words, follow Him that, so, ye may be guided." Surah 7'F/158. Some really natural occurrences in Muhammad's life, miracles are fond children of faith, said Voltaire. And such occurrences are invariably associated with the lives of prophet and the chosen few. One may choose to call them portents or signs of the divine will. One such sign was the miracle of the birds, depicting how the invasion of Hijaz by Abra, the Abyssinian governor, was frustrated on the eve of the birth of the prophet. A minor incident has been narrated by the early traditionalist and the contemporaries of the Prophet Muhammad, SAW, at the age of 4 or 5 while he was under the care of his nurse, Halima. While he was playing, it is said, 2 men, dressed in white, took hold of Muhammad, laid him down, opened his abdomen and took something I know not what and went away, said his playmate, his foster brother, who ran to report to his parents. Halima ran to the place, embraced the lad who was stranding calm and ran home. This episode is narrated in the Holy Quran in the following words: "Had we not received your spirit, literally opened your chest, and dissipated your burden which was galling your back." Surah 94/13, Alam Nashara, 1:4. We may take this to be a divine operation to immunize Muhammad, a prophet in the making, against vice and keep it purified to receive God's message. Another remarkable event may be narrated, a historical event, connected with his public life, in the 35th years of his life, relating to the reconstruction of Kaaba. Reconstruction of Kaaba. A sudden flood had shaken the foundations of Kaaba, which cracked its walls. Kaaba had no ceiling and the treasures it housed were exposed to thieving. Superstition stood in the way of rebuilding Kaaba with doors and windows and any other alteration, and they did not have the expertise either. Right at that time, a ship belonging to a Byzantine trader coming from Egypt was washed ashore. The trader was skilled in building trade. The Meccans contacted him and obtained his services for the reconstruction of the building, with an Egyptian captain assisting him. Below the walls were found green stones which they decided to use for the foundations, and brought blue stones to the site from the surrounding hills. Everyone volunteered his services, and Mohammed SAW also volunteered to carry the stones to the site.